Every year, Americans spend more than $20 billion on sports drinks. 20 billion on liquids dyed electric blue and electric green, sweetened with corn syrup, thickened with gums, and flavored with compounds synthesized in a laboratory. And the pitch is always the same. You need electrolytes. You need science. You need this bottle. But here's what the label never mentions. 3,000 years before the first sports drink factory opened, Roman soldiers were marching 20 miles a day through the Mediterranean heat on vinegar water. Aztec long-distance runners were carrying seeds that turned their water into slow-release hydration. Shepherds in the hills of Anatolia were churning yogurt and salt into a drink, so functional that the modern world essentially rediscovered it and called it innovative. Today we are breaking down 13 natural electrolyte drinks sourced from the garden, the pantry, the fermentation crock, and the traditions of people who worked hard and could not afford to get this wrong. Pay close attention to number 1 on this list. It is something most people already own. And researchers were genuinely surprised when they tested it head-to-head against plain water. And stay with us through number 7, because the story attached to that drink involves survival. A desert. And a moment of restoration that modern physiology can now actually explain. Number 13. Cucumber mint water. The Song of Solomon describes gardens of spices, of henna and nard, of pomegranates and pleasant fruits. Among the detailed agricultural lists in Numbers chapter 11, cucumbers are recorded as something the Israelites deeply mourned, losing when they left Egypt. That is not a minor detail. You do not mourn something you could take or leave. Cucumbers were daily food, daily comfort, and daily hydration in a climate where that mattered enormously. The Egyptians grew them along the Nile Delta for at least 4,000 years. Greek physicians recommended them for cooling fever. In the traditional medicine systems of Persia, cool cucumber preparations were considered specifically appropriate for hot constitutions and summer illness, a classification that reads, in modern terms, as a hydrating anti-inflammatory food. Here is what modern nutritional science adds to that ancient intuition. Cucumbers are approximately 95% water, but that water is not traveling alone. It carries potassium, magnesium, and a compound called fisetin, a flavonoid that researchers have been studying for its possible role in supporting neurological health. Mint, meanwhile, contains menthol, which activates cold-sensitive receptors in the mouth and throat without actually lowering temperature, a sensory trick that makes you perceive coolness and reach for the glass again. That reflexive desire to keep sipping is not trivial. One of the primary drivers of chronic mild dehydration in older adults is simply that plain water feels unrewarding. Flavor that engages the senses is not decoration. It is function. Preparation: slice half a cucumber thinly. Add a generous handful of fresh mint leaves, bruised gently between your palms, to release the oils, and combine with 2 liters of cool water. Do not use hot water. Heat drives off the volatile menthol compounds before they reach your glass. Steep in the refrigerator for at least 4 hours, ideally overnight. The result is pale jade in color, gently aromatic, and noticeably more refreshing than plain water in a way that is difficult to explain until you try it. The ancient kitchen garden kept a cucumber bed by the door for the same reason a modern kitchen keeps a water filter on the counter. Access matters. The drink that is ready to pour is the drink that actually gets consumed. Number 12. Watermelon juice with lime and a pinch of salt. The Hebrew word for watermelon avatiach appears in the Book of Numbers, listed alongside cucumbers, lakes, onions, and garlic as the foods the Israelites remembered with longing from Egypt. Ancient Egyptian tomb paintings from as far back as 3000, before Common Era, show watermelons among the provisions prepared for the afterlife. The Egyptians were not sentimentalists about food. If it went into the tomb, it was because they believed the body would need it on the other side. Arab physicians of the medieval period, including Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, classified watermelon as a diuretic and cooling food appropriate for summer heat. Traditional Chinese medicine placed it in the category of foods that clear heat and generate fluids. Two civilizations. Opposite ends of the Silk Road. Functionally the same recommendation. The modern nutritional profile explains why. Watermelon is approximately 92% water by weight, but that water arrives with potassium, a trace of magnesium, natural sugars that assist intestinal fluid absorption, and an amino acid called citrulline. Citrulline is converted in the body to arginine, which plays a role in nitric oxide production, a molecule involved in blood vessel relaxation and blood flow. Early clinical work on citrulline and exercise recovery is preliminary, but consistent enough to have sustained, continued investigation. Lycopene, the carotenoid that gives watermelon its red color, has been studied for cardiovascular support, with results researchers consider worth building on. The preparation detail: most people miss the rind. Watermelon rind contains higher concentrations of citrulline than the flesh. Traditional Mexican agua fresca sometimes incorporated a small amount of the white rind in the blending process, a practice that turns out to have genuine nutritional logic. Blend ripe red flesh with a thin strip of the white inner rind, the juice of 1 lime, and a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt per 2 cups of juice. The lime adds potassium and vitamin C. The salt adds sodium, completing the electrolyte profile that the fruit alone lacks. Serve immediately. Citrulline degrades on extended exposure to air. Watermelon is not a dessert. It is a canteen that grows in the garden and arrives already sweetened, already cooled, already portioned for the afternoon. Number 11. Hibiscus tea with salt and honey. The hibiscus flower does not appear by name in canonical scripture, but the Roselle variety Hibiscus sabdarifa has been cultivated in the Nile Valley since the age of the pharaohs. Ancient Egyptian records describe a sour red drink made from its dried calices, served at royal courts. In West Africa, it became bissap, the drink of celebrations and gatherings. In Mexico, agua de Jamaica has been sold chilled at street corners for centuries. 3 continents, 1 flower. And the same functional conclusion reached independently by people who had no contact with one another. That convergence across cultures, separated by oceans, is the most reliable signal we have about a food's genuine utility. When Egyptians, West Africans, and Mesoamericans all arrive at the same plant for the same purpose, without comparing notes, it is worth asking what they all discovered. Hibiscus calices contain organic acids, primarily citric and malic acid, along with anthocyanins, the same class of pigments found in blueberries and red cabbage, which have been studied for antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity. The research most notable for hibiscus involves blood pressure. A review of multiple clinical studies found that hibiscus tea consumption was associated with modest but consistent reductions in systolic blood pressure in people with elevated levels. The mechanism appears to involve ACE, or angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibition, the same general pathway targeted by certain pharmaceutical blood pressure medications. Because of this, people already taking blood pressure medications should discuss regular hibiscus consumption with their physician before making it a daily habit. To prepare an electrolyte-optimized hibiscus drink, steep 3 tablespoons of dried hibiscus calices in 2 cups of water just below boiling around 185 degrees Fahrenheit. Not a rolling boil, which can degrade the anthocyanins for 10 minutes. Strain. Then dilute with 2 additional cups of cold water. Add 1 tablespoon of raw honey and 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. The salt is not optional here. Without it, this is an antioxidant drink. With it, it becomes a genuine electrolyte preparation. The flavor is tart, cranberry adjacent, and deeply satisfying cold. There is a reason entire trading cultures kept this flour in circulation across 3 continents for 4,000 years. It earned that place one hot afternoon at a time. Number 10. Barley water with lemon. Barley appears in Scripture with a frequency that signals staple importance, not occasional use. Ruth gleaned barley from Boaz's fields. The feeding of 5,000 included barley loaves. In the book of Ezekiel, barley is listed as part of the prophet's prescribed ration, and in Deuteronomy, it is named among the 7 blessed foods of the promised land: wheat, barley, vines, figs, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey. This is not background detail. These 7 foods represent what God considered sufficient for human flourishing. Hippocrates, whose writings shaped Western medicine for nearly 2,000 years, specifically recommended pitesane, a preparation of barley simmered in water and strained as a restorative drink for the ill and the recovering. It appears repeatedly in his clinical notes as appropriate for fever, weakness, and digestive distress. British hospitals served lemon barley water to recovering patients well into the 20th century. For decades, it was the traditional hydration drink offered to tennis players at Wimbledon. In India, barley water remains a common household remedy for summer heat and urinary tract irritation to this day. What Hippocrates observed empirically? Modern nutritional science has since characterized when pearl barley is simmered in water for 30 to 40 minutes, it releases beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that creates a slightly viscous, silky texture in the water. Beta-glucan has been the subject of extensive clinical research. The Food and Drug Administration has authorized a qualified health claim linking beta-glucan consumption to reduced risk of coronary heart disease based on that evidence. The gentle starches in barley water also help slow gastric emptying, meaning the fluid is absorbed more gradually and retained more effectively than plain water. To prepare, simmer 1/3 cup of pearl barley in 4 cups of water for 40 minutes. Strain. The liquid will be cloudy and faintly golden. Add the juice of 1 full lemon, 1 tablespoon of raw honey, and 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. Drink warm for recovery from illness. Cold from the refrigerator on hot working days. The taste is mild, slightly earthy, with a natural creaminess that plain water simply cannot replicate. 3,000 years of clinical observation is not accident. It is data collected without a laboratory, one patient at a time. Number 9. Chia fresca. Chia seeds do not appear in the canonical biblical text, but their closest cultural parallel, the uses of small seeds as sustaining travel food, echoes throughout Scripture. The Aztec records, however, are explicit. Chia seeds were collected as tribute from conquered territories, stored alongside corn and beans as essential food reserves, and given specifically to messengers and warriors who needed to travel fast and far without resupply. The Aztec word for chia, chian, was important enough that the Mexican state of Chiapas derives its name from it. The Tarahumara people of northern Mexico's Copper Canyon, documented in contemporary accounts as capable of running hundreds of miles through mountainous terrain, have traditionally consumed a simple preparation called isquiate chia, seeds stirred into water with lime juice and a touch of sweetener. This was not folk medicine. It was sports nutrition, developed over generations by some of the most demanding endurance athletes human history has produced. The mechanism is genuinely interesting. When chia seeds hydrate, they form a mucilaginous gel that can absorb up to 12 times their own weight in water. That gel passes through the digestive system slowly, releasing fluid gradually, rather than triggering the rapid intestinal transit that can make plain water feel like it runs straight through you. A 2011 study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research found chia-based hydration comparable to commercial sports drinks in supporting endurance performance, a result researchers noted as worth exploring further. The seeds themselves supply calcium, magnesium, potassium, and alpha-linolenic acid, the plant form of omega-3 fatty acid, in a package requiring no processing beyond soaking. Preparation is almost absurdly simple. Stir 2 tablespoons of chia seeds into 16 ounces of cold water. Add the juice of 1 lime and 1 tablespoon of honey. Wait 10 minutes, the gel needs time to form. Stir again before drinking. The texture surprises most people, the first time small. Soft. Slightly slippery beads suspended in slightly thickened liquid. It is an acquired sensation, but one that most people find satisfying rather than strange once they adjust. The Tarahumara did not have sports nutrition science. They had canyon terrain and centuries of trial and consequence. They arrived at slow-release hydration through the most demanding testing environment imaginable. Number 8. Tomato juice with celery salt. Tomatoes are a New World plant, unknown to the ancient Near East. But the tradition they slot into using the liquid of pressed and fermented vegetables as a restorative drink is deeply ancient. The Roman garum, a fermented fish sauce, was consumed in small amounts as a mineral-dense condiment. Brine from preserved vegetables was drunk directly in many ancient cultures. The principle was consistent, concentrated vegetable liquid carries minerals that plain water does not. Tomato juice inherits that tradition in a form accessible to every modern kitchen. A single 8-ounce glass delivers approximately 500 milligrams of potassium, more than a small banana, along with 400 to 700 milligrams of sodium in commercial versions. Lycopene in concentrations higher than raw tomatoes because cooking breaks down cell walls and increases bioavailability. And vitamin C, folate, and vitamin K. The sodium-potassium combination in 1 glass mirrors almost exactly what the body loses in an hour of moderate outdoor labor. That is not coincidence. It is the vegetable's natural mineral profile. Concentrated. What most people miss is the celery connection. Celery contains apigenin and a compound called 3-in-butyl phthalate, the source of its distinctive flavor, along with naturally occurring sodium in organic form. Adding celery juice or celery salt to tomato juice does not just improve the flavor. It adds a secondary organic sodium source alongside the tomato's potassium, creating a more complete mineral profile. This is why the classic Bloody Mary mix, stripped of its alcohol, functions as a surprisingly effective recovery drink, a fact that bartenders intuited and nutritionists have since confirmed. For homesteaders, paste tomatoes like San Marzano or Amish paste process into juice most efficiently. Run them through a food mill, not a blender. The mill separates seeds and skin, producing a cleaner liquid with less bitterness. Add celery salt and a pinch of smoked paprika. Can in quart jars with lemon juice as a natural acidifier. The result is summer's garden, bottled and waiting for February. The vegetable patch is a pharmacy. The sports drink aisle is a billboard. The difference matters. Number 7. The Elijah drink. We stop here, because this entry carries a story that the science alone cannot contain. 1 Kings, chapter 19. The prophet Elijah has just come through the most dramatic public confrontation of his ministry, the contest on Mount Carmel, and instead of resting in triumph, he is running. Running into the wilderness, south of Beersheba, a landscape of scrub brush and stone, and merciless sun. Collapsing under a broom tree, and asking God to let him die. He had nothing left. Not courage. Not hope. Not food. Not water. 40 days of accumulated ministry. Fear. And flight had brought him to the ground. And what happens next is one of the most physiologically precise restoration accounts in all of ancient literature. An angel touch him. Arise and eat. Elijah opens his eyes and finds, beside his head, a cake baked on hot stones and a cruse of water. He eats. He drinks. He lies back down. The angel comes again. Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. He eats and drinks a second time. And then, the text records this. With quiet precision, he rose and traveled on the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. That is not metaphor. That is a description of what properly restored electrolyte balance can do to a body that has been running on empty. The cake on the hot stones would have been simple grain, likely barley or wheat flour, providing complex carbohydrates for glycogen restoration. The water, the cruse, a clay vessel of the kind used to carry water for travel, replaced the fluid lost to days of fear-driven flight. But here is what the text may be quietly encoding in that climate, on that terrain, with that level of physical and psychological depletion. Water alone would not have been sufficient. The body in extreme stress loses sodium, potassium, and magnesium through sweat and through the physiological cascade of prolonged fear. Replacing those minerals alongside water and carbohydrate is precisely what modern rehydration science specifies. The angel did not bring Elijah a speech, did not bring comfort first, or theology first, or an explanation of his suffering. The angel brought food and water, because the body cannot hear wisdom when it is in physiological crisis. The cells must be restored before the person can be reached. What drink belongs here? The simplest version of what Elijah received: water, a source of minerals in our context, sea salt, and a source of quick carbohydrate to pull that water through the intestinal wall and into the blood. The folk rehydration drink that centuries of desert cultures arrived at independently: water, a pinch of salt, a spoonful of honey or sugar. 2 ingredients, potentially life-saving under the right circumstances, and the oldest scriptural endorsement any drink on this list can claim. If this kind of ancient knowledge resonates with you, hit like and subscribe, because what's coming next goes even deeper. Number 6. Salted lemonade. Across India, on afternoons when the air itself seems to press down, street vendors work from carts laden with lemons, salt, cumin, and ice. The drink they produce, shikanji, or nimbu pani in its simpler form, has been sold on those streets for centuries, and it accidentally encodes a formula that health researchers spent decades developing in laboratories. The World Health Organization's oral rehydration solution, credited since the 1970s with saving tens of millions of lives, primarily children dying of dehydration from cholera and diarrheal illness, is built on a principle called the sodium-glucose cotransport mechanism. When glucose and sodium are present together in the intestine, they activate a specific protein transporter in the intestinal wall that pulls both molecules, and water with them, into the bloodstream at a rate far exceeding what plain water can achieve alone. This was called, by one Lancet editorial, potentially the most important medical advance of the 20th century. Shikanji contains lemon juice, potassium, and vitamin C cold water, a pinch of salt sodium, and a spoonful of sugar or honey glucose. That is the co-transport mechanism in a clay cup, arrived at by Indian street vendors through generations of empirical observation under a punishing sun, before anyone in a laboratory had named the mechanism. The black salt, sometimes used in Indian versions kala namak, adds a dimension most Westerners have never encountered. It is volcanic rock salt with a naturally high sulfur content and a distinctly eggy, pungent quality that reads, to the uninitiated, as unusual. But it has been used in Indian traditional medicine for at least 1,000 years as a digestive aid, and its trace mineral profile differs meaningfully from ordinary sea salt. The roasted cumin frequently added to shikanji jeera pani contributes iron, manganese, and a warming volatile oil called cuminaldehyde that has been studied for its effect on digestive enzyme activity. Preparation: juice 2 lemons into 16 ounces of cold water. Add 1 tablespoon of honey, 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, or kala namak, if you can find it, and a pinch of roasted ground cumin. Stir and pour over ice. The flavor is bright, slightly savory, and aggressively refreshing, nothing like the sweet flatness of most commercial lemonade. Plain lemonade is the incomplete version. Every culture that lived under real heat understood why. Number 5. Switchel. There is no biblical reference to switchel, but there is a deeply biblical principle embedded in it, the principle that the people who do the hardest physical labor deserve the most restorative drink. Deuteronomy is explicit about the dignity of workers. Proverbs honors those who rise early and labor faithfully. And the agricultural communities of colonial New England who developed switchel were people who read those texts literally and organized their lives around them. Switchel, also called haymaker's punch, ginger water, or swizzle depending on region, emerged in the American colonies in the late 17th century, possibly with roots in Caribbean agricultural traditions carried north through trade. By the 19th century, it was so standard on New England farms that stone jugs of it were lowered into wells to cool on every haying day, and field workers expected it. Laura Ingalls Wilder's mother is recorded serving ginger water to haymakers, noting specifically that cold, plain water made men sick after heavy sweating. Herman Melville references switchel in his writing. It was, for a season of American agricultural history, as common as coffee. Its core ingredients have individual credentials worth examining. Blackstrap molasses, the darkest, most mineral-dense grade. Extracted last in the cane refining process carries what the lighter grades abandon. 1 tablespoon of blackstrap molasses provides approximately 300 milligrams of potassium, nearly 20% of the daily recommended value for calcium, and meaningful amounts of iron and magnesium. It is one of the most mineral-dense sweeteners available at any grocery store, and it costs less per serving than any supplement. Apple cider vinegar, unfiltered and with the mother culture intact, provides acetic acid, which has been studied for its possible role in modulating post-meal blood sugar results. Researchers consider preliminary, but worth continued exploration. Ginger contains gingerols and shogols compounds studied for anti-inflammatory activity and for their well-documented effect on nausea and gastric motility. The pinch of salt restores sodium. To prepare, combine 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons of blackstrap molasses, 1 teaspoon of freshly grated ginger dried works but loses volatile oils, and 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt in a quart of cold water. Shake or stir vigorously. The molasses resists dissolving. Refrigerate overnight, which mellows the vinegar's sharpness. Drink cold. This is not just a recipe. It is an inheritance. It ran with harvests that fed a nation and then quietly disappeared when processed food made effort seem unnecessary. The effort is worth it. Number 4. Beet kvass. Beets appear in the records of Babylonian temple gardens as early as the 8th century before Common Era. Ancient Assyrian botanical texts list them among the plants cultivated for the royal court. Hippocrates recorded their medicinal use. And in the great fermenting traditions of Ukraine, Poland, and Russia, traditions that stretch back centuries and that sustained communities through winters of stark difficulty, beet kvass became a household staple, so ordinary that its presence was unremarkable until its absence was felt. Kvass, in its grain form, is mentioned in early Slavic chronicles as a drink of common people and of monks. The beet version followed as beet cultivation spread through Eastern European agricultural land. In the medieval monastery tradition, fermented foods and drinks occupied a specific place in the rhythm of care for the community. Fermentation was not chemistry. It was stewardship of living culture, the same organisms that transformed cabbage into sauerkraut, barley into kvass, and milk into kefir, fed and tended like any other living thing in the monastery's care. Beets contain betaine, a compound that plays a role in homocysteine metabolism and liver function, along with folate, potassium, and naturally occurring nitrates. Dietary nitrate is converted in the body, with the assistance of oral bacteria, into nitric oxide, the same molecule involved in blood vessel relaxation mentioned earlier, with watermelon citrulline, but through a completely different pathway. Clinical studies on beet juice and exercise performance have shown consistent effects on oxygen efficiency and endurance capacity, with results robust enough to have made beet supplementation a mainstream practice among competitive athletes. The fermentation process adds a dimension the juice alone lacks. The lactic acid bacteria present in the brine produce organic acids that contribute to gut microbiome diversity, an area of active research with implications for immune function, mood, and metabolic health. The brine itself becomes a probiotic liquid, rich in sodium, from the salt used to create the anaerobic environment. To prepare beet kvass, cut 2 medium beets into rough cubes, do not peel. The skin carries wild bacteria needed to start the fermentation. Pack into a clean quart jar, add 1 teaspoon of sea salt, and fill with unchlorinated water. Chlorinated tap water can inhibit fermentation. Cover with a cloth and leave at room temperature for 2 to 5 days. The liquid will turn a deep garnet, almost black-red, and will taste salty, earthy, and tangy. Begin with a quarter cup per day. The flavor is assertive. Once it wins you over, plain water starts to feel like something is missing. Traditional households drank small glasses of kvass daily through the long winter, not because anyone had measured its nitrate content, but because they felt better when they did. Number 3. Ayran and lassi. The consumption of cultured dairy as a hydrating and restorative drink appears across the ancient world with a consistency that suggests functional discovery rather than cultural diffusion. Proverbs 31 describes the virtuous woman who provides food for her household, and fermented dairy foods were central to that household economy in the ancient Near East. In 1 Samuel, Abigail brings David bread, wine, roasted grain, raisins, and fig cakes, but also sheep and a skin of wine, in a provision that implies the kind of preserved dairy that would have traveled without refrigeration in that climate. Ayran, the salted yogurt drink of Turkey, and lassi, the yogurt drink of the Indian subcontinent, are the same functional invention arrived at independently by 2 great agricultural civilizations. Both begin with strained fermented milk. Both add water to thin it. Both add salt. The Turkish version is almost always savory. The Indian version exists in both salted and sweetened forms, the salted version being the traditional hydration drink. The sweetened version, a later cultural elaboration. The structural logic is identical, the electrolytes and protein of fermented milk, diluted to a drinkable consistency, with sodium added to replace what sweat removes. The protein content is what distinguishes yogurt drinks from every other item on this list. Whey protein, the liquid fraction of yogurt, contains a full amino acid profile and, crucially, a high concentration of branched-chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. These are the amino acids most directly involved in muscle protein synthesis and recovery. A salted yogurt drink consumed after physical labor does not just rehydrate. It initiates muscle repair. Shepherds walking stony hillsides under a merciless sun essentially invented the post-workout recovery drink 2,000 years before anyone coined the term. To prepare, combine 1 part plain whole milk yogurt with 2 parts cold water. Add 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. Whisk vigorously until frothy. The whipping incorporates air and creates the characteristic light texture. For the Indian salted lassi variation, add a pinch of roasted cumin and a few fresh mint leaves. Drink immediately. The flavor is cooling, mildly sour, and deeply satisfying in a way that synthetic drinks cannot replicate. Because what you are tasting is living culture, mineral balance, and protein. 3 things the body recognizes at a level deeper than preference. The rest of the world never stopped drinking this. The question is, why we did. Number 2. Coconut water. The coconut palm appears in ancient Sanskrit texts as kalpa vriksha, the tree that provides all that is necessary for living. In the Ayurvedic tradition, coconut water was classified as a cooling, nourishing fluid appropriate for fever, fatigue, and urinary complaints. Across the tropical world, the Pacific Islands, coastal India, the Caribbean, sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, coconut water occupied the place that commercial beverages now claim the reliable, available, understood hydration source of daily life. The nutritional profile justifies the reverence. 1 cup of young coconut water contains approximately 500 to 600 milligrams of potassium, more than a small banana and substantially more than most sports drinks. It carries sodium, magnesium, calcium, and natural sugars in a ratio that multiple clinical studies have found comparable to commercial sports drinks for post-exercise rehydration, with less added sugar and no artificial compounds. The electrolyte profile is so balanced and so compatible with human physiology that there are documented medical accounts from World War II field conditions in the Pacific, and from more recent emergency medical literature of coconut water being used as a short-term intravenous fluid substitute when sterile IV solution was unavailable. Its osmolarity, the concentration of dissolved particles, falls within a range that the body can handle intravenously without causing cell damage. One precision point: most people miss the window of optimal nutrition in coconut water is narrow. Young green coconuts, harvested at 5 to 7 months, contain the highest electrolyte and lowest sugar concentration. As the coconut matures, water volume decreases, sugar increases, and mineral content shifts. The packaged coconut water on most store shelves has been heat pasteurized, which extends shelf life but alters some heat-sensitive compounds. If you have access to young coconuts found in Asian grocery stores in most American cities, open them fresh and drink immediately. The flavor difference is significant: slightly sweet, faintly grassy, clean. Caution: coconut water is notably low in sodium relative to potassium. For heavy outdoor labor in hot conditions, add a small pinch of sea salt. And for people with kidney conditions who need to manage potassium intake, consult a physician before making it a daily staple. Nature did not put electrolytes in coconut water by accident. She sealed them inside a sterile container and attached them to a tree. That is not poetry. That is engineering. Number 1. Milk. This is the one promised at the beginning, and the science is as straightforward as the ingredient is familiar. In 2011, researchers at St. Andrews University in Scotland published a study comparing 13 common beverages, including water, sports drinks, orange juice, coffee, and beer, for their ability to keep fluid in the body over several hours after consumption. The metric used was beverage hydration index, how much fluid remained in the body 90 minutes after drinking, relative to plain water. Water was the baseline, a score of 1. Milk scored between 1.5 and 1.6. Both full-fat and skim versions. Significantly higher than water. Higher than most sports drinks. And higher than orange juice. Oral rehydration solution scored similarly, which makes sense, because the mechanism behind milk's hydration performance is essentially the same as the mechanism behind rehydration solutions. Milk contains sodium. Milk contains potassium. Milk contains lactose, a sugar which activates the sodium-glucose cotransport mechanism in the intestinal wall. And milk contains protein, which slows gastric emptying, meaning fluid moves from the stomach into the intestine more slowly and is absorbed more completely rather than passing straight through. All 4 components work together. Remove any one of them, and the performance drops. The Mishnah, the foundational compilation of Jewish oral law completed around 200 Common Era, contains detailed tractates on the proper care and use of dairy animals and dairy products. Milk occupied a central place in the economy of the ancient household, not simply as food, but as a complete nutritional resource. The phrase, A land flowing with milk and honey appears more than 20 times in the Hebrew scriptures, not as vague metaphor, but as a specific promise of abundance that an agricultural people understood precisely. Milk meant thriving animals, which meant thriving pasture, which meant rain and soil health and a functional ecosystem. It was the summary indicator of flourishing. The modern discovery is that it is also, physiologically, one of the most complete rehydration beverages available. Not sports drink adjacent, actually superior to water in clinical measurement. For those who tolerate dairy, a glass of cold whole milk after outdoor labor, at the end of a hot afternoon, or first thing in the morning after a night of inadequate fluid intake, is genuinely one of the most effective recovery drinks accessible to the average person. Add nothing to it. The composition is already complete. Dairy farmers have known this for generations. They handed cold milk from the springhouse to field workers on blazing July afternoons, and the workers drank it by the pitcher. And none of them needed a research paper to explain why. The research paper eventually caught up. The principle that runs through every glass. You may have noticed something across these 13 drinks. None of them came from a factory. All of them came from something grown, fermented, pressed, or steeped. And every one of them that performs best in modern hydration research contains the same combination of elements: water, a source of natural sugar or starch, and minerals, particularly sodium and potassium. That combination is not complicated. It is, in fact, one of the simplest nutritional principles in existence. And yet, the modern food industry has spent decades persuading people that achieving it requires purchasing a product they could not possibly make themselves. Here is what gets lost in the processing. Commercial electrolyte drinks typically use refined sodium chloride, high fructose corn syrup or isolated glucose, and synthetic potassium salts, the minimum necessary compounds to trigger the co-transport mechanism. Stripped of everything else. A glass of homemade switchel carries not just potassium and sodium, but magnesium, ayran, calcium, acetic acid from fermentation, gingerols from ginger, and complex carbohydrates from molasses. Hibiscus tea carries anthocyanins, organic acids, and trace minerals alongside its electrolyte profile. Beet kvass carries living probiotic cultures alongside nitrates and folate. The isolation of the active ingredient and delivery of only that is, in every case, a reduction, not an improvement. The ancient world knew this by practice rather than by biochemistry. They did not know what a co-transport mechanism was. They did not know what a flavonoid was. But they discovered, through generations of careful observation, that the drinks that came from whole sources pressed, brewed, fermented, steeped produced better outcomes than simple water alone. The research is now beginning to explain why, and the explanation, in each case, turns out to be the same. The full matrix of compounds in a whole food source works in ways that its isolated components do not. What you pour into your glass in the morning is a choice about how seriously you take this principle. And it is worth asking now that you know what the ancient drinks actually contained, what it is that you have been drinking instead, and what it was missing. If this video changed the way you think about hydration, hit like right now and subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who still reaches for the blue sports drink after yard work, someone who deserves to know there is a better history available to them. And drop a comment below. Which of these 13 drinks surprised you most? Which one are you going to try first? I read every comment. And your answers shape what this channel covers next. Health disclaimer. The information in this video is educational and historical in nature and is not intended as medical advice. If you have specific health conditions, including kidney disease, high blood pressure, or pregnancy, consult your physician before making significant changes to your fluid intake or trying new foods and beverages.